wherever you are.
I'm Ryan Kilgore.
I'm Elizabeth Pennington.
Cody Turcott.
And I'm Brooke Visser.
And today we're going to be discussing the dangers of smartphone use.
Okay, so 95% of teens have access to a smartphone, whether if it's their own or if they're borrowing it from a parent or something along those lines. 45% of teens say that they are on their smartphones on a near constant basis, and teens can spend upwards of 9 hours per day on social media sites. And what this is all saying is that there is a large group of people that are feeling the effects of smartphones. So, our guiding research question was, how do smartphones influence American teenagers' overall health? And this led us to the argument of excessive smartphone use can be detrimental to one's health, therefore awareness should be spread about it. So I'm going to pass it to Ryan, who's going to talk about the health detriments that smartphones provoke.
So there are many detrimental health effects in the future for our generation. They range from eye health to sleep deprivation, but the largest of these is probably eye health. It can cause excessive smartphone use can cause cataracts, dry eye, and cause eye cancer and even damage your retina. And that's why the Journal of Ophthalmic Epidemiology recommends at least less than 2 hours a day of smartphone use. So the excessive blue light from the smartphones and the excessive use causes sleep deprivation, and this was discussed extensively in the Scientific American. And sleep deprivation can lead to many long-term health effects such as obesity and cancer. And it can impact your ability to learn and retain information. And another large effect that comes upon with sleep deprivation is depression, and this is a thing people struggle with their whole life. And the more often people use their phones, the more likely they are to have ADHD symptoms. So what's the solution to this problem? So there could be a new law that's passed that prevents excessive use by minors and makes it illegal to lie about your age when you're signing up for a social media platform or getting a smartphone. It could also take the form of warning labels, and there could also be a limited use option that is given to parents from telecommunications companies such as Verizon or AT&T that would let them limit their children's smartphone use. So this solution is not without its limitations. Many children would probably react poorly to this issue since they're already acclimated to using their smartphones frequently, and it's going to be expensive and it will require lots of time to pass, and it doesn't recognize the potential benefits of low usage levels of smartphones.
Looking through a scientific lens, research shows that social media negatively affects adolescents' brains. Social media is websites and applications that enable users to create and share content. Media has become increasingly popular over the years, especially among adolescents. However, this unhealthy screen time addiction can become very toxic because of the unrealistic body images teens see online. Nearly half of the world's population is on social media. That's 3.03 billion people, and a majority of these are teens. One of the most popular platforms today is Instagram. Instagram is a free photo and video sharing app available on Apple iOS, Windows, and Android. The total amount of monthly Instagram users is 800 million, and again, a lot of these are teenagers. As teens spend countless days scrolling through Photoshop images and highlight reels, they start to feel inferior about their overall image. And this happens in the medial prefrontal cortex, or the MDFC for short. This area of the brain is involved in motivation, rewards, recognition, and positive information. This is why social media becomes so addictive, is because when teens post a picture, they get more likes, a rush of dopamine starts to form in their reward center, and they want to keep getting this feeling. However, this cycle can turn toxic very quickly if teens do not receive as many likes. As a teen posts a picture on Instagram, the same parts of the brain are activated as if a teen had just ate chocolate or won money. On the other hand, if a teen does not receive as many likes, they start to feel inferior about their overall image. According to Coronado, a clinical therapist, low self-esteem has consequential problems such as depression, anxiety, and stress. When a teenager is rejected on social media, this affects the anterior cingulate cortex, which is the suffering component part of the brain. This means that low self-esteem physically hurts. In addition, communicating through a screen does not allow the use of mirror neurons. Mirror neurons play an important role in communication because they are the region that are involved with facial expressions. And when you're not seeing facial expressions when communicating, it allows you to say outrageous comments, which induces the use of cyberbullying because you would say things you wouldn't normally say in real life because you're not seeing facial expressions. A few solutions to this issue would be limiting screen time use to 15 minutes per social media account, only checking notifications on when you get a notification, and setting screen-free times such as after 9 p.m. or on the car ride to school.
Cyberbullying is the use of technology to essentially reduce the level of importance of a person. This form of bullying can be potentially the most degrading because it provides people with an immense audience to criticize through words of hate. Through a social lens, bullying can be perceived as a growing issue among children and adolescents. 59% of U.S. teens have been bullied or harassed in some way online. Cyberbullying withholds an undignified impact on the person being bullied, which can result in lower self-esteem rates as well as health complaints, including depression and suicide, and even decreased academic achievement. With the effects of bullying comes the aspect of comparison and identity formation. These elements are the determinants of the way in which a person perceives themselves. Social media can foster the idea that acceptance depends on the way in which you are perceived. Comparisons between people based on social class and social roles, beauty, popularity, and wealth accumulation. This differentiation from one person to another leads to the two types of comparisons, upward and downward. Upward comparison is a comprising between an individual and those superior to him, possessing positive attributes, while downward comparisons mark the relationship between an individual and those inferior to him, possessing negative attributes. Social networking programs can alter the overall identity of oneself, presenting a false interpretation for the person who views it, meaning the way in which a teenager views the media can have an adverse toll on their social lives. Despite these negative implications, the media is known for various positive aspects. Each platform of social media contains one overarching topic in common, which is communication. Social media is used day to day by a majority of teens throughout the United States, with the goal of communication in mind. Communication and connection go hand in hand in their role in integration into a society. The extent of the drawbacks, however, significantly outweigh these positive aspects. Pediatricians are in a unique position to educate both complexities of the digital world. These medical specialists can offer recommendations to both parents and adolescents to aid in ceasing the negative outcomes.
There is no one best solution to fix our immense issue. However, there are a lot of solutions that we could use to fix this issue, our main being limiting screen time use for teenagers overall.
Okay, and another thing that could be done is warnings on about smartphone use that is issued by the manufacturer, and it could even take the form of an age restriction.
If we encourage pediatricians to explain these negative health impacts on adolescents, it could aid in ceasing these negative outcomes.
In conclusion, these solutions may have their drawback. However, it's the best way to censor the use of smartphones among teens.
Good job. Give me just a second, 6 minutes. We'll move on to your questions. Alright, so Ryan, I'm going to start with you. Okay. Give one specific way that your thinking changed as a result of learning about Brooks' findings.
So before I read Brooks' paper, I didn't really think about the impact of cyberbullying and self-esteem on the detrimental effects of smartphone use. I focused mainly on the physical effects of it and not the mental. So I learned about a whole new range of issues that can be caused by excessive smartphone use that are not just sleep or eye related.
Okay, thank you. And then Brooke, speaking of, question for you. Reflecting on your colleagues' work, your group's work, which one of them had the greatest impact on your overall understanding of the problem that you guys identified?
So I think Elizabeth had the greatest impact on our overall presentation because of the statistics that she brought to the table. It really made us understand how these numbers of teens are being severely affected by these social media apps. So we got to see how it's integrated into society.
Okay, thank you. Elizabeth, what is an example of a compelling argument from one of your peers, IRRs, that you guys actually didn't end up including into your presentation?
So Cody had some great research on the political aspect of social media, so like politics, everything like Twitter, Donald Trump on Twitter. But however, unfortunately, we couldn't integrate that into our PowerPoint because we decided to focus mainly on adolescents instead of adults, and a lot of politics deals with adults. So we had to kind of rearrange what he was going to talk about.
Okay. And then Cody, I promise we didn't plan this. This is great. Good job. From a team perspective, what was the most challenging part of this project?
I think the most challenging part was making sure that we all got parts to speak. Because as we said, my stuff wasn't really put in a lot because it was political and that doesn't really fit with teens.
Mm-hmm.
So it's difficult to find parts where I could speak in it.
Okay. All right, guys. Great job. Thank you.
Today we will be discussing the negative impacts the continued usage of chemical sunscreens will have on the world. The complexity of this issue comes from the fact that the chemicals are extremely effective at blocking ultraviolet rays from the sun, but they are also posing negative threats to the marine species, and specifically corals.
One drop, according to our calculations, one drop of oxybenzone contaminates 4.3 million gallons of water. That's 836.6 quadrillion gallons of water a year. Out of the hundreds of quintillions of gallons of water in the ocean, oxybenzone has contaminated approximately 9% of the ocean. That is the equivalent of about half the Indian Ocean. This is an extreme problem that needs to be fixed now.
So this information led us to our question of how these toxic chemicals are specifically targeting the coral reefs.
This led to finding that oxybenzone, octinoxate, and butylparaben are the main suspects because they damage coral reef and they bleach it. Coral bleaching is when the phytoplankton around the coral die and the coral loses its color, becomes brittle, and eventually dies. Some chemicals are worse than others. According to Craig Downs from the Heredicus Environmental Laboratory in Clifford, Virginia, and his colleagues around the world, oxybenzone not only bleaches coral reefs, but it mutates their DNA. Oxybenzone does this during its most vulnerable time when the coral is reproducing. Coral only reproduces once or twice a year in the presence of a full moon. When this happens, the coral emits its sperm and egg into the ocean where they combine to make new coral. But if the ocean around it is contaminated by oxybenzone, then it mutates the coral DNA so the skeleton of the larva will encase itself and slowly make the larva die. This is a major part of the problem because not only is coral dying, but it can't even reproduce properly. So what happens is it makes it so almost impossible for coral to make a comeback at all. And in a few decades, coral will become extinct.
So while it would be easy to say we should just simply stop using sunscreen, there are some major ethical dilemmas. Chemical sunscreens have been used for decades in the United States because they are so effective at blocking UV rays. The Food and Drug Administration has approved the chemicals for just this reason. However, recent studies suggest that the chemicals are having negative effects on marine environments, especially coral reefs. Arguing for the removal of chemical sunscreens is difficult because the opposing force is driven by the threat of skin cancer. Some natural alternatives do not provide the same amount of protection as chemical sunscreens, but a combination of zinc oxide and titanium dioxide has proven to be a better fit for protecting against UV rays and skin cancer. On the other hand, corals are a huge necessity for the survival of humanity and the world as a whole. Corals provide approximately 50% of the oxygen on Earth. Losing corals means we lose all that oxygen, which in turn will start a chain reaction of losing species after species until essentially the entire world population of organisms has gone extinct. Skin cancer can be extremely costly for a family, but years down the road without corals, that money will be completely irrelevant if we're all dying out from a lack of oxygen, which Alexis will elaborate on later.
The information shows that coral reefs are dying and that we need to take action now, but there are some limitations. As Lane previously stated, that 8,000 people in the U.S. alone are dying of skin cancer every year. And treatment costs for skin cancer are through the roof. The best way for people to prevent skin cancer is for everybody to wear sunscreen. But the problem is, sunscreen kills coral reefs. And coral reefs are vitally important for the human race and for the Earth's health. Although it is proven that titanium dioxide and zinc oxide do not harm coral reefs and are just as effective as blocking out UV rays as oxybenzone. Therefore, we propose a ban sunscreens with the chemicals oxybenzone, octanoctate, and butylparaben, so that we will stop a coral reef from dying and everybody will have an efficient way to wear sunscreen and not get skin cancer.
So there are valid arguments for both sides here. Banning toxic chemicals include saving coral reefs, at least partially, protecting coastal environments against storm surges. Economies dependent on ocean tourism can thrive, and the food produced by coral reefs can be preserved. The corals are not dying solely due to chemicals, though. Corals are also struggling to live because of the warmer water temperatures. They cannot adapt to these warmer temperatures quick enough. So by eliminating the threat of chemicals, they can hopefully adjust their DNA to fit the warmer temperatures better. And by limiting the amount of chemicals that go into the ocean, we can hopefully also significantly reduce the rate at which corals are bleaching and dying. On the contrary, those who are prone to skin burning and are previous skin cancer patients might strongly disagree with this proposal. However, doctors can prescribe certain sunscreen products for people with these conditions, so a few exceptions to the law can be made. And another reason the ban may be rejected is because large sunscreen manufacturers may struggle to adapt to this new legislature. Sunscreen companies that have been making the products for decades have used chemicals, so it is evident why it may be difficult for them to switch. This is why there will be a time period allotted for these companies to change their formulas to fit the new law. And hopefully, this proposal will appeal to the moral side of those against the ban, so they can realize how essential this change is for the environment and world as a whole.
We have a choice right now of what our world will look like in 50 years. With no actions, we will see coastal communities being devastated by the lack of coral reefs, as seen by the researchers at Princeton University in the departments of physics, geosciences, and fluid dynamics, who found that coral reefs, healthy ones, actually reduce the impact of tsunamis by 50%. Many communities rely on the growing tourism industry to support their development, and so they base their infrastructure around it. But without coral reefs, these areas would face greater threats to the loss of buildings, power, water lines, and roads, which are vital to the industry, and it impedes on their ability to reopen their shores. As seen by the numerous instances of natural disasters that have occurred in the last century, including the tsunami in 2004 in Japan that costed $13.5 billion of physical damage. This ingredient change is also not significant to consumers, as it stays within the $2 to $3 range per ounce that these chemical sunscreens are at right now, and they're physically appealing. These buyer preferences conclude that in the future, this will not weaken the market, but will in fact reach a greater audience of those wanting to preserve marine life. Not only will it affect the land, but based on the statistic given by Dylan earlier, at the rate we are going in 50 years, only 50 years, 20% of Earth's water will be contaminated, including the species that reside in it. As shown on the map above, the Indian Ocean contains 14.5% of Earth's water. That means in 50 years, more than the Indian Ocean's worth of water will be dead. However, if we stop the usage of chemicals such as oxybenzone now, we will not only be protecting the coral reefs, but we will give more researchers the time to find and fight against global warming, another factor that's killing the coral reefs. Chemical sunscreens are killing the coral reefs, but they are a threat that can be mitigated. With coral reefs providing half of Earth's oxygen, a habitat for many species, and protecting coastal communities and their largest source of revenue, It is important that we enact policy now to ensure that in 50 years, we have coral reefs and we have a place to call home. Humanity could depend on this.
Great job. All right, a couple of questions for you. Dylan, I'm going to start with you. Reflecting on your colleagues' work, which one of them had the greatest impact on your overall understanding of the problem that you all identified?
I think I think Alexis had a really big impact of just like how, or actually, yes, it was Alexis who brought up the fact that how bad skin cancer actually is in the work and how much we actually need sunscreen. Because without it, because that added to the whole complexity and limitations of how we need coral reefs, but we also need the sunscreen.
Okay, thank you. And then going to Alexis. What is an example of a compelling argument from one of their IRRs that didn't make it into the presentation and why?
So something that Lane brought up was the economic standpoint of, the cost of cancer versus coral. And, based on the time limit for this presentation, we skimmed over it and weren't really able to go in depth about it, or the cost of how much it takes to bring in the species from the coral reefs and how much that actually assists the human race. And so overall, and broader, we were doing our elevator speech, so we had to really skim over the surface of it, and it was important just to get the main details in.
And then Lane, having finished this project, what, if anything, do you guys consider to be a gap in your research that if you guys had more time, you could invest more to make you even more sure about your conclusions?
So, like Alexis was just talking about the economy perspective of it, she did hint on how tsunamis and stuff like that severely impact coastal environments when they hit the coast. But something we didn't go in depth on the research was the overall cost of these natural alternatives and how they might affect the large sunscreen companies, because through that time period that we have allotted for them to change their formulas, if they don't meet the new requirements, then what's going to happen to the company? Do they have to shut down, or do we have to give them an extended time period or like a fine or something? So I think maybe researching more into depth on that would have given us a better understanding of our new solution.
This is social media's effect on the smoking habits of Generation Z Americans. I'm Rebecca Bowles.
I'm Cheyenne Jones.
I'm Eli Logan.
I'm Clayton Williams.
The Center for Disease Control and Prevention has found that 1 in 5 deaths are caused by smoking. They also report an alarming number of deaths by smoking and smoking-related illnesses, totaling 1,300 people every day. Teens' use of cigarettes and e-cigarettes is detrimental to their health, which is why we decided to focus on this very important topic. We believe that social media is a platform used to influence minors into smoking, and we believe this should be stopped. Our guiding question for our presentation was, how does social media affect Generation Z Americans' smoking habits?
Fewer teens plan to smoke because they believe it does not make them look cool, and believe it causes lung cancer and heart attacks. In 2015, 94% of teens said would not smoke. However, in 2015, 25.3% of teens were vaping. Doctors, students, and psychologists have similar reasons why teens decide to vape. Their ease, availability, and size, flavorings, advertisements, they make it popular and they become popular. Another reason is teens believe there's no negative effects of vaping. One college student, Julian Lavender, started vaping when he was a sophomore in high school. He said, at first it was, chasing flavors and do smoke tricks. That's really impressed him. To build off this, about 66% of teens just say it's flavoring and it's not harming them. Some of these flavors are cotton candy, apple, chocolate, banana, and melon. A study done by Christopher Berlin and Maria Koldis has shown that teens have a common misconception about the harmful effects of e-cigarettes. A potential solution is advertise more about the negative effects of vaping to teens, like how nicotine affects the body and how popcorn lung reacts to lungs, and what is exactly in a vape. The limitation is some teens might not just care about the effects, and vaping is still relatively new to teens, and research on medical effects is really low.
Advertisers use social media as a platform to advertise to minors. According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, 7 out of 10 teens are exposed to smoking-related advertisements. These advertisements psychologically influence minors in their smoking habits by using 2 main types of advertising. The first is point-of-sale advertising. This is where an advertiser advertises their product directly on the place of sale, such as an image with a link. This doesn't allow minors much time to contemplate their decision of purchasing the product before making an impulse buy and making a rash decision. They click on the link or image almost immediately following today's shopping trends. This type of ad also includes special promotions, such as a time limit to click on the advertisement to get a special deal. The second form of advertising is loaded phrases. This form of advertising is used to evoke an emotional response in the reader. An example of this is shown through the phrases, "Why quit?" and "No, you'll fade away with every puff." Such phrases are used as persuasion for their brand, even if it is an anti-smoking ad, such as the one on my right. According to an article published in the American Journal of Public Health, such phrases are a strong factor behind teen smoking. A potential solution for this issue would be to institute an algorithm that takes down advertising and sponsorships that target minors, some of which Rebecca will later mention. This would help to curb the amount of teen smoking, but it could also take down legal advertisements that causing the loss of revenue for companies that are not doing anything wrong.
Adding on to what Eli was saying, celebrity endorsement is another form of advertising that strongly affects the social media viewed by teenagers. Without knowing, the celebrities such as Cole Sprouse, Jenny McCarthy, and Leonardo DiCaprio are promoting the use of smoking, using smoking devices such as cigarettes, e-cigarettes, and vaping devices. Here is an Instagram post from Bella Hadid, who is a well-known American model among the teen population. She is using a Juul, which is one of the most popular smoking devices among the teen population. Over here are some examples of the positive feedback that she receives in the comments, such as, "So retro, hard eyes, and nicotine queen." This encourages her to post more photo shoots and images of her using her Juul, and it also encourages her followers to want to be Insta famous and follow in her footsteps. She also uses a retro filter, which adds a positive light to smoking. According to Jafarova, a PhD, and Chloe Rushworth, a senior PR and social account executive at the Lenny Agency, current research findings show that where a celebrity values a particular brand or product, their followers are likely to be of the same opinion. In the image, she is using a Juul, which is a specific smoking device, which means it'll be easier for her followers and those who admire her to follow in her footsteps. A potential solution to this issue is that parents should monitor their children's cellular devices and social media accounts. Some implications of this are the parents are more involved in the child's life and the child is in a better social environment. However, some limitations of this are that the child may think it's an invasion of privacy and there may be a misunderstanding between the parent or child.
So many people know what a Juul is. However, not a lot of people know what the other e-cigarette companies are. The reason for this is because Juul is all over social media. It's on Snapchat, Twitter, YouTube, everywhere. A study was conducted by the Institute for Health Research. And in this study, they tracked the amount of tweets tweeted about e-cigarettes for 2 months. This number came out to be 73,627 tweets. 90% of these tweets were commercially advertised or tweeted about right now. We can expect cigarette companies to stay in business for a long time. In 2008, the world was going through an economic difficulty time period. And in this time period, the cigarette companies actually made more money than they did the previous year. This shows us that when people are stressed economically, they will go to cigarettes and buy them because it is a stress reliever. And other things talked about by Cheyenne Jones. All right, next. In the graph to my left, you see the average increase in e-cig use among high school students and middle school students. The blue line represents high school students, the gray line represents middle school students, and the yellow line represents the average between the two. Why is there a huge gap between the high school and the middle school students? The reason for this is because as a student goes from middle school to high school, the parent becomes less involved in the kid's life. And going back to Rebecca's potential solution of if the parent would stay involved in the kid's life, monitor his social media use, then they could keep them from doing drugs. This would also decrease the amount of e-cig use by high schoolers and middle schoolers and decrease the gap between the two. A potential solution is to publicize the bad about the smoking devices. This would discourage teens from using them. A great example of this is the Truth Initiative. They do a great job by running a campaign to prevent people from using them. They say all the bad things about Juuls and smoking devices. Limitation of this is it will cost money to advertise on social media. However, you can become a nonprofit organization like Truth Initiative.
Our best solution would be to take legal action against cigarette and e-cigarette companies. A three-step process would be implemented. First, companies would be required to provide documents proving they are not targeting minors, such as the Camel Cigarette Company in 1997. If these companies are in fact targeting minors, they will be subject to legal penalties such as fines. This would cause a reduction in the targeting of minors. Some limitations of this would be that it would take up space in courts as well as push back more important legal matters. This could cause the loss of jobs for people in the cigarette and e-cigarette companies because of the loss of revenue for the companies. In conclusion, we do believe that taking legal action against these companies will help alleviate teen smoking, and that social media and the advertising against minors should be stopped.
Good job. Let me move through the questions that each of you will be answering one question. Right? So going to start with Rebecca. Okay. Describe how the content of the team presentation was changed as a result of your ongoing conversation.
So as we had a conversation, Eli was talking about how he analyzed some of the advertising that is viewed in general rather than on social media. So we decided to kind of analyze both, as well as the sponsored posts and advertisements that you see on social media such as Instagram and Twitter. And so it really affected the group as a whole.
All right, and then Cheyenne. In the future, what change would you make to your group norms, and how would you expect that that would then improve the team presentation?
Well, we would improve like how we got together. We had a lot of complications and trying to get together and actually practice presentation and work together as a group. We'll probably have to try to communicate more.
Okay. And then Eli, what is the way in which your team's resolution makes you think differently about your own individual research?
Well, our resolution talked about taking legal action against these companies. And in my research, I was finding a lot of things about advertising. So I never really had a full perspective on how this should be stopped. So our resolution gave me insight into a way that this issue could be stopped rather than my research just focusing on the effects of it.
Okay. And then Clayton, finishing up with you. From a team perspective, what was the most challenging part of this project?
I would say the most challenging was getting together because of the floods and it was hard to meet. And then during lunchtime we lost focus and it was hard to come together and practice. But we did do a great job of practicing by ourselves and like texting our time to each other.
Okay. All right. Thank you guys.
I'm Samantha. I'm Lauren. And I'm Taylor. And today we're going to be talking about the negative impacts caused by the modeling industry. After putting together our lenses and all of our research, we can determine that the modeling industry does have negative impacts on the bodies of women in first world countries. They do this by having a limited body type in the media and not being inclusive to all women. Glancing at the visual, you can see that there is a 23-pound and 7-inch difference between the average American woman and the average American model. You can also see whenever you look to the right or left that girls ages 8 to 14 gain 40 pounds during puberty, and many of them feel the need to slim down and go on a diet, and about 3% of them go too far and end up with anorexia or bulimia, which are two very common eating disorders. To provide some background on this, models and consumers both receive unfair treatment from the industry. Models oftentimes end up with the eating disorders such as body dysmorphia, anorexia, bulimia, and in turn the consumers get one as well because they are seeing such a limited body character in the media. Emily Butcher, model for Next Model Management, said that so many women are having to compromise their physical and mental health for the advancement of their careers. In this quote, she is referring to societal norms and how the pressure of them cause many women to feel the need to go on a diet because they aren't getting the kind of representation in the media that they need.
Okay. So in order to reach the thin ideal model figure, most models do not eat enough. They have eating disorders, like Abby said, and this has become increasingly dominant over the last 40 years. Most models weigh an average of 23% less than an average woman, and 20 years ago, this was a mere 8%. Problems with eating disorders has increased 400% since 1970, said Paul Suggett, a writer for Balancing Careers, covering careers advertising. So some solutions are ensuring healthy BMIs, meal planning of foods, and health practitioners, which would help provide a more healthy and stable environment for the models and help keep them healthy, and to also provide positive impact on the consumers who watch the ads. Some limitations to this are you can't always have a positive BMI, costly practitioners, no time for breaks or plans because of the busy schedules, and all these things can be limited, but in all honesty, the positive impacts way more than limitations.
So marketers have developed an idea to only include thin and tall women in their advertisements. And as Samantha said, societal norms do play a major role in this idea. So Jean Kilbourne is a writer, public speaker, and activist for women's rights, and she said women and girls compare themselves to these images every day, and failure to live up to them is inevitable because they are based on a flawlessness that does not exist. The industries that go against this quote are toxic to the young minds that view them, such as girls in middle school and high school who haven't really developed their sense of being yet. With this chart, we've seen that with more access to the internet, there's more of a negative influence than a positive influence on body positivity in social media for young women. So some solutions to this is to communicate when photos have been airbrushed, such as the marketers putting a caption underneath their photos. This helps to be inclusive and diverse, but with this, the diversity needs to feel natural and not forced. To do this, body positivity campaigns can be implemented. However, they can flop, such as the UK and Victoria's Secret made a 2015 campaign called the Perfect Body Campaign, and immediately this received backlash from Twitter saying that it was not inclusive. But since then, there have been more campaigns like it, such as American Eagle and Aerie, and these have been much more successful. There's also been a requirement of health, as Samantha said, for public healthcare practitioners. Some limitations to these are the strict views of marketers. They want to have that thin ideal in their campaigns. Since the airbrushing helps to sell the products, they don't want to bring attention to the fake of the photo. They want to keep it as real as possible. And companies do choose who they want to be in their campaign, so they have their choice of diversity, and if they don't want to be diverse, they don't have to. Also, public practitioners can cost from $40 to $90 depending on how many people you have and where you live. So if you have more models, it gets more expensive.
Paul Suggett, a career advertisement writer, once said, "Until the public responds more favorably to images of real people, very little is going to change." So body image issues are something that women of all ages deal with. Research from the Health Search Funding Organization provided us with statistics to prove this. As you can see, 42% of girls 1st through 3rd grade want to be thinner. And as Lauren mentioned earlier, with media impacting children of such a young age, this presages the 80% of women who also experience body dissatisfaction. A study by Florida State University researchers reveals that women are more likely to pay attention and remember advertisement with plus-size models and average-size models rather than thin models. They recruited 49 college-age women who indicated that they wanted to be thinner, and they recorded their psychological responses as they viewed images and after they answered some questions about their body satisfaction and the comparisons that they made with the images. So after viewing images such as these, they were able to express that with viewing thinner models, they made more comparisons, they paid less attention and remembered less about the advertisement, and they left having less body satisfaction. But viewing plus-size models, they made fewer comparisons, they paid more attention, and they remembered more about the advertisement, and they left with higher levels of body satisfaction. Some solutions to this would be that understanding that beauty standards are changing. It's like fashion, it's the desired body type changes within the generation that you're born into, so it's never something that's going to be the exact same. Another one would be using social media for good, such as body positivity campaigns. Social networks and celebrities hold so much power in what they do. If they use it for good by promoting all types of women and body styles, it could potentially change the mindsets for many. And the last would be boycotting companies that are not inclusive by simply just avoid buying products from the companies that you do not support, such as the current boycott for Victoria's Secret with the Perfect Body campaign. Some limitations to this would be social conformity and peer pressure. It's an issue that nobody can solve. Many people operate themselves in a way that's going to please others, so if they believe that's the way to do it, it's how they're going to operate themselves. Another one would be misconception of equality. So if the industry was to change their ways and start advertising mainly plus size and average models, then the people would start asking questions of what's wrong with the thin ideal and what's wrong with being thin, and ultimately there may not be a healthy balance between the two. And finally, thin ideal is such a popular thing in our society that many people believe it's the desired body type, and opinion is something that you simply can't change.
In conclusion, we believe that incorporating health practitioners, making diversity feel natural, and aiding the cause with social media is going to be the best solution to benefit consumers, marketers, and models. We believe this because although incorporating the health practitioners is going to be costly, you would rather a company sacrifice money rather than sacrifice the health of their models. Making diversity feel natural would allow all women to have some kind of representation in the media, whether they're thin, plus size, or average. Aiding the cause with social media would allow women to empower other women through Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, or Facebook, or any other kind of social media.
So a couple of questions for you guys. Taylor, I'm going to start with you. Give one specific way that your thinking changed as a result of learning about Samantha's findings.
So Samantha ultimately brought to the table the solution of having the health practitioners brought into the modeling industry, which is something I never personally thought about. And so she explained and brought the statistics to support about how putting these practitioners into the industries can potentially stop these models like Abby was talking about from getting these eating disorders, and even though they may still be on the thin side, they are what is considered healthy, so it's not influencing the customers in a negative way.
And then Lauren, just moving down the road. In the future, what change would you guys make to your group norms, and then how would you expect that to improve the overall presentation?
I think definitely our communication should have been a little bit better because we had times where it was difficult for us to meet up and communicate and figure out what everyone's schedule is. And I think that would help us get more practice in for our presentation.
Okay. And then Samantha, what is an example of a compelling argument from one of your peers' individual reports that you guys decided to exclude from your presentation, and then why did it not make the cut?
Okay, so a lot of my information that I had researched was futuristic, and it was about how in the future we'd have $376 billion more per year that each company would spend on advertising. And in terms of timing and just how it wasn't affecting, it wasn't connecting with anyone else's research, we had to basically knock it out and be it's not exactly what we need for our presentation.
And then Abby, As you reflect on your participation within the group, what did you realize about yourself as a group member? And in what ways has this project changed you?
Well, throughout this group project, I learned that I actually really enjoy working with the group, and I think it's much easier to do a presentation with the group rather than speaking by yourself, because when we met at Taylor's house, I think it was last night, we were really like trying to help each other figure out a way to make our solutions and our limitations and make the beginning and the ending flow really get together. And I remember Lauren brought something up that Taylor was doing about how her transition was really good, so I think that being able to rely on your group is something extremely helpful, and I learned that I really like that, and I prefer doing it with the group than by myself.
Okay.